So we have with us here Nitin Sharma. Nitin is the general partner and co-founder of Antler India. Antler is one of the best early stage investors right now in India. And Nitin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Bala. Thanks for being here and thanks for the kind words.
Absolutely. So Nitin, we've known each other for a while, and I watched you and your partner Rajiv sort of take something from nothing to get here. And it's been a phenomenal journey in just like a matter of few years. But one thing, unique angle that you guys have taken, especially recently, is to sort of look at DPI seriously, digital public infrastructure. So before we get into AI, I would love to know what got you interested in digital public infrastructure and general things like Beacon and ONDC.
Sure. Well, again, thanks for the kind words. I think we are very, very early. So, it's a very, very long journey and that's just the first innings. So all of us have been fans of what Aadhaar and UPI enabled for India. And all of us have seen as operators, investors, the tremendous impact and the overall value creation. And, since 2016, I think, I was personally following a lot of efforts to create innovation around India stack. And fast forward, when ONDC started being talked about and Sushmit on our team is sort of the one person who's taken the lead on it. I think sometime around late 2022, we started to really ask ourselves, what are the biggest moonshots? We're in the business of moonshots, and Antler by definition goes one step early than most investors because we call our focus this day zero, -1 to 0. And so we owe it to ourselves to take a longer view than many other investors might be. Every investor has a certain stage focus. So I think we have the responsibility and the luxury to take a 7-10 year view of things. And when we looked around and really asked ourselves, beyond all the hype and the funding cycles, what are the true transformational moonshots where it may not work, but if it works, it could completely change the country and create a lot of value. And ONDC, despite a lot of questions that were at that time, it was very, very nascent, stood out as, a big disruption. And of course, we started to follow what was happening and started to develop our own thesis and did many, many hours of conversations with various stakeholders and put something out early last year in the public domain as well. And since then, we've just been putting our money where our mouth is, making a number of investments with making DPI as one of the pillars for us. So I think it's a top 3 theme for us. So we've invested, I believe, 5 or 6 ventures already and hope to do many more.
Nitin, for some of the people in the audience who don't know the Antler model,
Sure.
It might be worth explaining why this is not just another VC in town.
Yeah. So we are in the business of venture capital, but every day we remind ourselves that that's the capital structure. What we really in our DNA try to be is a platform, not just a fund, but a platform for people to start companies. So I like to say that we are not in the deal flow business as much as in the company creation business. So Antler is the place where we want some of the most ambitious people in India to think of coming and starting their journey with us. What that means is at day zero, which is really our focus, day zero investing. What does that mean? Day zero means for some, it may mean that you have decided to take the plunge as an entrepreneur, but you still are a few steps away. You may not have a co-founder. You may not have finalized the idea. So a lot of traditional venture capital needs you to de-risk some of these things before the journey to product market fit starts. For us, we take pride in saying that, and it's a very hard job, much more risk, much more patience required to go one level sooner and say, we will help you find a co-founder. We have residencies that run and teams get created. If teams already exist, we will work with you. We'll be a sounding board in a short 4 to 6 week process to help you validate some ideas and so on and so forth. And finally, we will connect everyone in a very global network. So there are 2 distinctive things about Antler. One is what I just described, the platform and the day zero element. The second is the global element. We are just one part of a very, very large network that Antler has built, started in Singapore in 2017, 2018. So we're very young actually in the scheme of things. Probably the fastest growing early stage platform now, physical presence in 30 countries. And what that means and why that's interesting and relevant for entrepreneurs is, as India is changing and entrepreneurship in India is changing, many more founders. I mean, you've been a person who's built companies in abroad, so you know cross-border and you've seen multiple ecosystems. I think the amazing thing is more and more people are deciding to think global from day zero. It used to be the norm that you would spend 5 years in India, then if things were going well, you would go abroad, right? Gen Z founders, experienced founders, Silicon Valley talent coming back, multiple reasons leading to this imagination that why not think globally from day one? And that applies to AI, that applies to even DPI, that applies to climate, that applies to Web3. So we think thematically about these big shifts, and in any case where global is a big element, we think we are a really good option for the best founders. And even if global is not the focus initially, then we try to help you as much as we can locally.
Oh, phenomenal. And that's a good sort of segue into AI, because AI is one of those technologies which can easily transcend borders. Literally, it can translate into any country if you want. Does Antler Global have an AI thesis? Do you have an India thesis, India AI thesis? Yeah. And how have you acted on it?
So, I mean, you cannot be in the VC business without, I was thinking about how many companies we've invested with an AI team. And then I realized that pretty much every company that we are investing in has some AI element today, right? Gen AI, of course, discriminative AI has existed for a long time. So I will answer that by saying when we started, our primary focus is the founder. So we are agnostic for that reason, and we don't claim to be extreme domain specialists. We try to stay true to the idea that our job is to be the first step for a lot of great founders, especially in terms of a very early validation, team creation, etc. We give you the springboard, and then there are many more specialized downstream investors. That being said, of course, we've given it quite a bit of thought. Our lens was not thinking about what's our AI thesis, but specifically what kind of companies can now be created in India, from India for the world, or in India for India. And that's been very interesting. And we've had some good chats, and I've always learned a lot from those. I would say that, no surprise, the way you try to simplify it is roughly the founders we see fall in 3 buckets. One which I personally would love to see much more of is very foundational things, models, and even infrastructure, but very foundational. There, our question has been, of course, not so much, can you build a chat GPT from India? Obviously, that's formidably hard. But what does it mean for Indic languages? How Indic LLMs have to be, you can question where the value will get captured, but they have to be one of the biggest things we can do right now. And there, unfortunately, of course, I've seen there's a scarcity of both amazing founders and capital. So we also know founders who are struggling to raise capital because those check sizes tend to be so much larger. And I wish, if I had one thing to say to a lot of downstream investors, it would be, guys, let's take more risks. This is what this business is about. So we've invested, we're looking, but typically those checks can be much larger. So we are willing to participate alongside other investors because our checks are modest in the range of like 250, 300,000 as a first check, of course. The second bucket is tooling, and call it tooling and infrastructure. So I think that's where we have made 3 investments.
Wow.
One is a company focused on serverless GPUs, company called Inferless. They pivoted into this. Another one around automation of API testing, and another which is still in the works. And then the biggest bucket is the third, which is the application side, which is where most of the action is. And we've made four or five investments there too. And I'm talking about one specifically with the Gen AI theme. Of course, many other investments, every product today is AI led in some way.
But you think of AI first when you say
Yeah. I mean, with the specific use case in mind. And in terms of coming back to your thesis, I would summarize it by saying, look, on the foundational models or infrastructure side, we think that Indic LLMs are a great long-term opportunity, and I don't buy the idea that there isn't value to be created. On the middleware tooling side, I think we've seen some examples of LLM ops types of companies, or more testing infrastructure, or deployability like Inferless, serverless GPUs, etc. And I think there'll be many more. But the third bucket is where I think we really have seen so many things, and we try to now put more of a sector or use case lens. So I kind of look at the parallel of SaaS when it started moving from horizontal to vertical SaaS, right? When you went to vertical SaaS, what became far more important was not just the SaaS business model, but the founder and the team's ability to understand that domain. So similarly, with so many co-pilots and agent types of startups, and I think where the biggest question in our mind is like, of course, where is the moat? Because everybody will do it somewhat similarly. So we try to go much more in terms of the domain use case and the founders of the team's ability to understand the domain. Because in short, I would say that we're trying to sort of look at it more vertical use case specific on the application side.
So if somebody is listening to this and they're looking at themselves and saying, hey, maybe I should do this, what kind of skills should they have, or what kind of domain specialty should they have to say, you know what, I want to knock on Antler's doors and I think this is a good fit?
Yeah.
What should they be reflecting on?
I think my first response is we are believers that, great founders today come from any background. I mean, just this morning I was talking to a team which has no background in one part of consumer. They're trying to build something for home decor, and the team is actually from McKinsey and a lawyer and a developer. And then I corrected myself in saying, these notions of founder market fit and founder product fit are also something we should reimagine a bit, because great founders can come from any background. And also in our setting, many of the times teams get created. So my first message would be, don't hold back. If you think you are someone born to be a fantastic founder, if you have those fundamental qualities, I don't think something is dramatically different. I think you should approach us and you should apply and you should learn. And I think the best founders are just great learning machines. So you can figure this stuff out. And then maybe through our network or outside, you can find the right complement in terms of the founding team. So I don't think that's as daunting to go after in a startup. That's a high level view. Now, coming back to specifically in those three buckets, I would say clearly I think most people will not be able to stand up and say, I'm going to build an Indic LLM company. I think you clearly need to have very, very deep domain research knowledge and also access to the right infrastructure and labs and things like that. That's why there is such a small number of people in India who can do that. But I wish we see more of that. On the tooling side or the supporting infrastructure side, I think they look a lot like SaaS. So I think founder backgrounds not that different. It's just great SaaS selling skills, SaaS building skills can at least be a good starting point, right? When you're doing LLM ops and all. Of course, the rest of it is to figure out the consumer very, very deeply. And on the third bucket, which I was calling the application side, I think there, as I said, as long as you feel you can understand a domain or a use case well, and as long as you believe that you can imagine what the moat can be, you should go for it. So in short, I think it's far more open and democratic than it appears.
Anything that you are staying away from, any place that's saying, that's not what we're doing right now?
I think there are clearly parts of this which we don't understand. So, in short, something extremely technical, something which is, we've seen, for example, startups trying to focus on 3D and creating 3D environments with Gen AI and all. Now, that actually is an interesting problem, and it's not something we are staying away from. But I think there are problem statements where it seems like, okay, this needs a lot more diligence. And I think at the end of the day, we recognize that we are building from India. So our lens comes back to, where do founders in India have somewhat of a right to win? That's what I would say. So, I'm sure there are, but we are thankfully a lot of other people in the network who can guide us when we don't have the expertise. So I don't think there are that many things we're staying away from.
You mentioned right to win. What does it mean?
I think I'll go back to what I was describing. I'll give you an example. One of our recent investments, it's not announced, is a company that is trying to use Gen AI specifically for 2D animation. Now, if you just take the lens I was describing, so say, okay, Gen AI can now help you create imagery and content very quickly, then immediately you would also think that many people can go after this. So who has a right to win, right? Now, we've backed a team which is actually looking at it more in a use case first and a domain first approach. So what they're saying is, look, they come from a background where they've dealt with thousands of animators. They're not AI folks. They're building the AI muscle, but their knowledge of the very, very small nuances of how an animator works and how a 2D object is moved in an animation, and why consistency of output is important when you use different types of models, and their ability to then think of go to market. Those actually matter more because because I think a lot of teams today have, obviously with things like Midjourney and ChatGPT, etc. I think the baseline is already set. So a lot of teams talk about fine tuning models, and that's table stakes. So I think what we actually asked ourselves, is this an AI bet? But we think in a lot of these cases, right, what would actually matter is understanding the things like consistent output is far more important than you saying I'm using a crazier model. So again, basic thing of going back to the consumer and their needs. So the right to win essentially is, because I struggle with this question of the feature versus product risk quite a bit. Like most things end up looking like a lot of co-pilots. Every role you can think of, sales, product, growth, marketing, there are startups getting started with co-pilot products. So the question always is this tomorrow, there are incumbents from the Adobes to Salesforce and all, everybody is talking about their own co-pilots. So what's the moat? So I struggle with the feature versus product question. And I also struggle with just generally where the moat is. So I think depth on the inciting around the customer, it comes back to the same principles, right, of a company. Right? That doesn't change. You still have to first make sure you're understanding your customer very, very deeply. And then you can start the process of building an AI first company.
So I guess it kind of goes back to your vertical SaaS.
Correct.
Understanding the domain.
Because Indian founders, I mean, you would know this as well or better than I do. I think we were very bullish on vertical SaaS, the whole ecosystem. And there have been very few vertical SaaS companies that have jumped to 10, 50, 100 million. Very few, right? Handful. And that's because it's not about cheaper. Well, it's about better. And the thing that ends up curtailing progress is the founding team has not been in the shoes of those. You're building for a dentist or a veterinary clinic in the US. The idea of building from India with 1/3 the sales cost, 1/4 the support or engineering cost, and 1/5 the support cost sounds very exciting. But unless the founders have deeply understood that customer, it doesn't scale beyond a point. So I'm kind of using that lens here as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great lens to use. On a personal level, Nitin, what AI tools do you use? GPT, I presume you use GPT-4, but
I mean, just tinkered with with that and Midjourney, etc. But no, I should be using much more. I don't use as many as you do. But part of the challenge is just the sheer volume of what we are inundated with.
What do you use it for? What do you use GPT
I think
for?
I've been perplexity and just nothing. I mean, I'm just using it for what everybody else uses it for. I'm just trying to understand how knowledge is being
productivity.
Productivity for sure. But I think so I think if you're getting into how does the VC role change, and there is an AI stack, I would say guilty of not being at the cutting edge of that. There is actually like someone who's written complete AI stack for how everything in a firm should be AI first. And we are taking some baby steps in that direction, but far away from that, because ultimately what our business is a lot of conversations. We've crossed 40,000 people who've applied. Right now we are selecting a new cohort, some 6,000 applications. I think something like 1,500 interviews, and all compressed in a short amount of time. So there are days when me and Rajiv and our colleagues have calendars packed with interviews. And I think more intelligent call summaries, sentiment summaries, and picking sort of the nuanced bits is how I can retain knowledge. I mean, this in the knowledge business. So it's not just productivity, it's just knowledge management now in a way that was impossible earlier, allowing you to scale and imagine a very different scale than was possible earlier. So I think we probably, as Antler globally and in India, we are trying to automate and use AI in as many steps as possible. But I think we're still early.
Anything cool, interesting that you came across and said, wow, that's kind of cool? Anything that comes to mind?
I mean, I've just picked the perplexity example.
Everybody's talking about perplexity.
Yeah, it's, I mean,
How do you like it?
I think that I've seen both examples of how the output is more useful than what we are used to for a long time with the search paradigm and first 5 links and ads and all of that. But I also have seen examples where it's not actually, I think I'm forgetting the tweet, somebody had tweeted yesterday an example where it's not actually answering it well. And I think it was live score. Somebody had put live score. Like, so if you live score, you're probably checking for a live score of a game, and I think something like that with Google is because they have dedicated product teams for any sport. There are people in Google working on cricket score. So I think their ability to understand intent and inference is so much higher versus I think the perplexity result in live score was something very generic and not useful. So I think this, but look, they're very early.
10 months old, so not so bad.
I just find it fascinating, and I wish we were seeing some of this happen in India, but I think next 10 years we'll get there where the next wave, something cool will actually be coming out of India. Of course, the founder is Indian. So one of the founders.
I think is a fellow IIT Madras alum. Rajiv and me. But speaking of that, where do you think, like if you were to fast forward, let's say 1 year, 2 years, all the bugs will be ironed out, like the challenges we're having. Where do you see the landscape at? What will Antler 2026 look like? Your cohorts, what will you be looking for? If you can,
like
with the lens of AI and perhaps digital public infrastructure, not immediately 6 months, so the teething troubles are over, but 2 years, 3 years down the road.
So I think Antler globally, we've crossed 1,000 startups.
Congratulations.
Big number. I was going to say it's not a vanity metric. I think we understand that our mission is to democratize entrepreneurship as much as possible. Our mission statement is make progress inevitable. So I think there is a reason why that number is scaling 2x every year. So I think we will have a very high density of this network in 2 or 3 years. Of course, we have to keep a very high bar of quality as well. I think India, I would imagine, will be the largest, if not the largest, maybe the second largest market within our little Antler universe. I think we will have invested in 100 startups by mid next year.
Nice.
We are at 52 now already. So, and I imagine that 80% of them will have obviously some differentiating element which AI is enabling, right? Every use case, every domain, everything we are seeing right now, the pitch inevitably includes like, well, what will be different is now the customer interaction will be much faster, engagement will be higher, retention will be higher because of Gen AI. But more importantly, I'd like to say we'd be proud of, being able to say maybe 20, 25 of these are truly AI first bets. We are at 6 right now. So yeah.
That's not bad. 6 out of 15, and Gen AI is just the starting.
Exactly. So a lot of them were done, but I think since last year, and I think we would do more, many, many more. Sometimes it's a check size, like I mentioned, but I think as the dust settles, I think more and more people are realizing it's not just because you have an AI first doesn't mean that you need to start with 2 million and dilute a lot more. Maybe there is a path where you can start with a check size and dilution that fits well with our framework as well. So I would imagine 25 is a very achievable goal.
It seems like it. One trend that I am observing is that the cost of developing software, where you need to hire an army of engineers, QA, test product managers, is changing, right? So one of the biggest use cases for Gen AI is coding and product definition. So I am looking at startups where previously it used to take 10, 15 people. You can do it with 3, right?
Yeah.
So which I think bodes well for the democratization part, because you don't need to raise 2 million, dilute yourself, right? You can raise 1 or 2 crores, which is I think an Antler's sweet spot, and just get going and own more of the company.
Yeah, and I think we spoke about it too. The fundamental notion of a business founder, tech founder, as the kernel of the company You could even question that today,
Yes.
right? So it has implications in the capital you need to raise, the dilution. It has implications in even when you get started. Or I mean, how many great people are not starting companies today because they're too scared or they just don't have the technical chops. But we certainly think we solve that problem for some people. But I think in general, many more people, as you said, should be less daunted. I think as has been discussed, the getting in is easier. The scaling is harder. Differentiating and scaling is now much harder because so that's why I was going back to the question of like differentiation, moats.
What do you bring to the table?
Your depth of understanding something, you being a learning machine. These qualities become far more important now than just your resume or pedigree. And yeah, so I agree. And I think the other element of this is when you and I were speaking several months ago, when we started looking at the thesis, one of the thoughts that comes, okay, IT services. What things have India had a right to win in the last 20, 30 years? And that's a $200 billion industry. And what happens to that? And so you also have to put on have an open mind about not just going after dev tools and product startups, even thinking about the services industry. Maybe there is a new type of company which we haven't seen yet. What will, I mean, of course, Infosys and TCS and the likes will adapt, and they are doing a lot on that themselves as well. But what other new companies will come out? Because services are not going to go away. The human element will still be important, and you may have new types of companies around human oversight, and I think we had spoken about, for example, certain BFSI types of clients who still need a combination of agents and humans, right? So there are opportunities everywhere, including this disruption of the IT services part. So
Chamath Palliapatiya is doing something called 80-90. I don't know if you've seen it, but basically saying I'll build 80% of your software at 90% cost reduction. The remaining you customize for yourselves. So I do think that we are entering an era of malleable software.
Exactly.
That's the new buzzword, where you are seeing this new age combination of IT services with like an almost finished product, which is customized for you very quickly.
Yeah.
So I think it's an exciting time. Nitin, thank you very much. I always found our conversations to be very thoughtful, and I always think about it afterwards.
Oh, thank you.
And
Likewise.
This is no different. And if you're an entrepreneur out there, or even have been dreaming about starting a company, but never got the guts to actually pull the trigger or actually jump in, you're always holding yourself back, saying maybe next time. But this will be a good time, and Antler will be a good platform.
Thank you.
Because the whole notion of matchmaking coming early,
and the global
and the global element. So starting in India, going global is a very, very big trend. So all you need to bring to the table is an idea or like a shape of an idea.
Yeah.
And then apply for Antler.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Nitin. Pleasure.